Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, preparing to check in on this bin of red wigglers, and I've got a nice little assortment of stuff from my freezer for them. It's a number of different types of fruits and veggies, and you can see a whole lot of frost accumulated in this collection of food. Perhaps it was the moisture coming out of the cucumbers or out of the grapes, but it's a little more than I'm used to seeing, so whatever, they're going to just get a little bit of extra moisture delivered in the form of ice to accompany today's feeding. And the way I thought I would deliver the feeding was into little burrito bundles. I've got 6 pieces of newspaper this size that I thought I'd wrap today's food into. But before we get started feeding, let me just really quick share with you the info about these red wigglers. The system's 105 days old today, so we were last in here 11 days ago, missing out on the 100th day in service, so happy 100 days in service. So those 105 days, that's the same as 15 weeks. The estimated worm count is 2784, and today's feeding is feeding number 10. The last systems that I checked in on didn't get any leafy matter sprinkled out on the top surface because the amount of material that I have remaining in my box is just limited, not enough to go around for 2 separate systems. But since we're only feeding one system here today, I thought perhaps we can just use leaves here again today. You can see we were pretty generous with leaves last time, spreading them out all across the top and quite thick too, quite a number of them. I'm wondering if perhaps we might go through a little bit of a exploration of the bin before we get down to feeding. This way we can blend in all this leafy matter. But before that, we could check in to see how the last feeding from 11 days is coming along. I've got a couple other systems that would technically be in line to be fed next sooner than this system. But in a way, I wondered if perhaps by moving this system to the front of the line, we might be back in time to see a little bit of a worm party happening down the center, because the feeding that these little guys got last time 11 days ago was the circular end off of a piece of watermelon, with even a little bit of watermelon remaining within the rind. And then it was just placed in here as they're feeding last time. And that's probably got a lot to do with why there's such moisture here. A big chunk of watermelon going in here, spilling out all of its moisture content would result in a bunch of pretty damp material. And I'll tell you the truth, I wasn't expecting to see any of the pink material of the melon remaining, but it does seem like some of it remains. Here I could see some of the green outer skin of the melon rind, but over here I'm seeing red, and guess what? It must have been put here as deception. I must have put it in there to trick myself next time I come back in here, because I don't think it's watermelon we're seeing. I think we must have just placed a red napkin in here. Not too surprising. I didn't really expect to see a whole lot of watermelon in a worm bin with this many worms in it after 11 days. The remaining moisture being still here is not too surprising. And a whole bunch of worms hanging out to take advantage of all that lovely moisture is not too surprising either, but the watermelon does appear to have been eaten. So I guess we just didn't get here early enough to run into them still working on it. I guess that's one of the hazards of having so many systems as I've got. Even since a lot of my systems are buddied up and paired up, I do feed lots of systems 2 at a time. But it's still like, 10 or more separate individual storylines going on every time I check in on a bin or a pair of bins that gets managed together. That's always its own separate video, and by the time I get around to checking in on that same batch of worms or pair of bins or whatever the case may be, sometimes it's 10 or more days that have passed. It's actually kind of unusual to be getting back here after only 11 days. So we've opened up a nice big pit, and we didn't really see what we had hoped to see, which would have been like a little worm party. Bunch of worms enjoying the remains of some watermelon. We got in here too late, but before we get to feeding, I still like the idea of following through on the idea I had of stirring in all this leafy matter since we've got a little bit more to give them at the end. So I figured let's just proceed to that next idea. Get all these leaves blended into this fairly damp material, possibly resulting in the material having some of its moisture transferred over into the leafy matter. And even if it doesn't, I just think it'll help create a bedding which will be even better for the worms, with all the moisture getting blended in with the leaves and everything getting combined. Really nice to see, you know, pockets of material with a whole bunch of worms just hanging out in it. Perhaps there were actually leftover remnants of watermelon remaining, and that's where we're seeing little pockets of worms still partying and enjoying what remains. But I don't think there was anything that we were able to easily see with our eyes. Perhaps it was just some lovely watermelon juice still lingering that they were taking advantage of. Or like I said earlier, perhaps just the moisture that remained from it being the main reason for little worm parties here and there. Yeah, lots and lots of moisture, but I don't worry so much about a 100-day-old bin like this. Still plenty of time, I think, for the moisture to get utilized properly, and certainly no risk yet of things getting too muddy with so much bedding material making up the majority of the stuff that the worms occupy. It's my older systems where I actually get into the withholding of bedding, where I start to feel like I've got to watch out to make sure I don't let things get overly damp and muddy, where it's primarily castings we're dealing with. But systems like this, where there's tons of bedding still everywhere, I almost think that there is an advantage to there being a high degree of moisture in a system like this, just to help the processes keep chugging along and being productive, keeping the worms comfortable and moving through the material that they're eating. I don't know, just the dark color of this little guy looks so good. All the worms in this system seem so nice and healthy. The worms that occupy this bin were the ones that came indoors. This is their first official stint as an indoor population of worms. They were the worms that lived in my outdoor worm bag version 6.0, and definitely a productive batch of worms. So let's get into my little burrito wrapping session here. Let's see if we've got enough stuff here to load up 6 of these. I'll have to distribute it carefully to make sure I don't run out before I get to the 6th chunk of newspaper. Perhaps just a little half a handful is enough before I go overboard and run out. Yeah, I think we're going to be in good shape. It almost even feels like I'm somehow managing to leave a lot of the ice behind, but that certainly wasn't my intention. I think I will just dump in the ice if it ends up being that way, that it just remains in my little transport container. Yeah, I think we are going to have ourselves a nice little ice treat to throw in here at the end. Oops, oh, just spilled some ice on my countertop here. So let me pick that up before I end up with some puddles. But here's the remaining few scraps of food and the ice chunks, which will actually come in pretty handy to help dampen some of this dry newspaper that's going in here. And you know, since the level of moisture in the system does seem a little bit high, I'm not too worried about the dry stuff going in here. I think it's all going to even out quite nicely. And I got a feeling that this newspaper is going to get in large part consumed by the next time we get in here. At least I hope so. Well, if not, that's fine too. We'll just blend it all in and let the worms keep working at it. Oh, looks like I got myself a little bit dirty there. I got to be more careful. Nah, it doesn't matter. I'll just head on over to the sink. So let's not forget, we want to use up some of this remaining leafy matter that I've got out here just to make the system look as nifty as it did when we first arrived, with a nice leaf coating out on the top surface. And yeah, you gotta love it. So nice looking. And the stuff even looks nicer after the materials had a chance to soak through from all the recirculating moisture beneath the plastic, making for a bunch of beautiful leafy matter that is just waiting to get blended in next time around. So that's it for our check-in, everyone, with the red wigglers here on day 105. Everything looks so nice. Gotta love it. Too bad we didn't get in here early enough to see a worm party still working on that melon rind we threw in here previously. But I guess I'm not too surprised after 11 days. So that's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.